The sky above Serapis Prime was burning. High-orbit bombardment from Solari dreadnoughts painted the atmosphere in streaks of molten fire, reducing once proud cities to glowing craters. The planetary defense grid, once a marvel of Serapis engineering, was in ruins. Shattered battle stations drifting lifelessly along the debris field that had once been their last fleet. Commander Velos stood inside the crumbling war room of the Serapis High Command, surrounded by battered officers, their faces drained of all hope. The Ixalari Dominion had finally won. The holographic table in front of him flickered erratically, struggling to process the sheer devastation unfolding outside. Red markers, enemy warships, planetary invasion points swarmed across the display. The last of their orbital defenses had fallen mere minutes ago. Serapis Prime had hours left at most before the Dominion stormed their strongholds and executed the remaining leadership. But transmission echoed through the command bunker, the voice cold and mechanical. People of Serapis Prime, your resistance is over. Your military is defeated. Surrender now, and we will grant you the mercy of a swift execution. Resist, and we will erase your world from existence. Velos clenched his fists. The voice belonged to Supreme Executor Zethrin, the ruthless Solari warlord responsible for countless genocides. The Dominion's mercy was a lie. They would exterminate the Serapis either way, just as they had done to 100 species before them. The officers around Velos slumped in resignation. Some removed their insignias, accepting the inevitable. Others stood silent, awaiting their orders, though their eyes carried no expectation of survival. But Velos refused to go quietly. The Serapis had exhausted every conventional strategy, every diplomatic plea, every final contingency. All except one. It turned to his communications officer, a weary young lieutenant covered in soot and sweat. "Send it." The officer hesitated. "Sir, the signal is ancient. No one even knows if." "Do it." The officer swallowed hard, then pressed the final command. Somewhere deep beneath the planet's surface in a forgotten bunker predating the Serapis Republic itself, a machine hummed to life. A transmission, encrypted in a language no living Serapis spoke, was sent screaming into the abyss of deep space, a desperate cry for salvation from something long believed to be extinct. Humanity. The Dominion's Supreme Fleet. Above Serapis Prime, Executor Zethrin observed the battlefield from the command bridge of the dreadnought Oblivion's Wrath. It was a towering Solari, his exoskeletal form encased in ceremonial war armor, adorned with trophies from 100 conquered species. His mandibles twitched in amusement as he watched his forces dismantle the last Serapis holdouts. The war had dragged on longer than expected, but the outcome had never been in question. The Dominion was absolute. Resistance was a temporary inconvenience. A subordinate approached, a frail, multi-limbed creature from one of the lesser vassal races. "Executor, the final Serapis cities will fall within the hour. Our ground forces." A sudden, high-pitched alert cut through the conversation. The bridge's holoprojector flared to life, displaying an encrypted deep space signal originating from Serapis Prime. Zethrin narrowed his many eyes. "What is this?" A Solari technician fumbled with the decryption sequences. "Unknown origin. The language is not Serapis, or any species within the Dominion's archives." Zethrin sneered. "Meaningless. A desperate signal to the void. They call for salvation, but no one is coming. Wipe them out." His command was acknowledged. The Dominion's planetary annihilation sequence was prepared. In 5 minutes, Serapis Prime would be nothing but a memory. An echo awakens. Across the void in the long-abandoned regions of space, where no starship had flown for millennia, something stirred. Beneath the surface of Luna, deep in the forgotten catacombs of an ancient war machine, sensors flickered to life for the first time in eons. Machines older than the Dominion itself activated, their cold intelligence analyzing the incoming distress signal. A sequence was triggered. Encrypted subroutines, untouched since the last war, unfolded within the heart of a dormant AI construct. It processed the message, calculated its implications, verified its authenticity. And then, for the first time in 10,000 years, the Terran Defense Network activated. Warning lights flashed across long-dead control panels. Silent shipyards hidden in the Orc cloud roared back to life. Darkened stasis vaults deep within Mars began to unseal. Automated defenses, long idle, ran diagnostics. Stealth satellites, still cloaked in undetectable orbits, shifted their lenses toward the galactic map. They saw the Dominion. They saw the war. They saw the atrocities. And so the system executed its standing directive. Priority Alpha 1 Protocol. Enforcement of galactic balance. Deploy overwhelming force. Neutralize hostile entities. And the war, the storm has begun. In the cold depths of space, unseen by the galaxy, a long-forgotten fleet stirred. Engines hummed to life. Shipyards activated dormant assembly lines. Planet-killer dreadnoughts, battle carriers, and apex warships, silent for millennia, prepared for war. Then, without a sound, without warning, the human fleet vanished into the dark. And the war was already over. The deep space listening post on that Solari-controlled world of Vorak-9 was built to detect any movement in the void. For centuries, its job had been routine, monitoring Dominion fleets, tracking minor rebellions, and ensuring no rival power could rise unnoticed. The last significant threat had been eliminated over 100 years ago. Which is why, when the alarms erupted, Chief Watchmaster Korak dismissed them as a system glitch. "Status report," he growled, stepping into the command center. The skeletal ridges on his exoskeleton tightened in annoyance as he scanned the panicked crew. A young technician, his mandibles clicking nervously, turned from his console. "Sir, we detected an anomalous energy signature originating from the Turan exclusion zone." The words sent a ripple of unease through the room. "The Turan exclusion zone is dead space," Korak snapped. "Nothing's moved there in 10,000 cycles." The technician hesitated. "Sir, something just did." Korak marched to the holotable and observed the data stream. What he saw turned his blood to ice. Massive power signatures. Thousands of them, emerging from the Sol system. At first, the readings didn't make sense. The energy spikes were too controlled, too precise, not the chaotic flaring of a natural phenomenon, but the deliberate activation of warships. Hundreds, no, thousands. "By the gods," Korak muttered. "What could generate this much power?" Then a single data packet arrived, piggybacked on an ancient transmission signal. It bypassed Dominion firewalls, ignoring their encryption protocols, as if they weren't even there. The message was brief. It was written in a language that had not been spoken in millennia. But every Solari knew what it meant. "We are awake." The command center fell silent. Korak took a slow, trembling step back. He turned to his second-in-command, his voice barely above a whisper. "Send this to the Supreme Executor. Now, unsealing the past." Deep beneath the surface of Titan, in a long-abandoned control facility buried under layers of ice and rock, something ancient was waking. The Terran Defense Network, the last safeguard of a species thought lost to time, was no longer dormant. A cascade of activation sequences unfolded across the system. Lunar control stations re-established contact with one another, verifying their readiness for war. Automated shipyards hidden in the asteroid belt roared to life, churning out fresh waves of war machines. Yet, for all the automated might that had been left behind, true power still rested within the Firstborn. Buried within stasis crypts on Mars, Titan, Europa, and beyond, the last warriors of the old wars began to stir. They had been chosen millennia ago, not merely as soldiers, but as executioners. Enhanced beyond all recognition, their bodies were reinforced with gene-forged muscle, their minds sharpened to process combat at speeds no organic being should have been capable of. Each was designed for war, and now war had come again. Across these silent vaults, cryopods hissed open. One by one, legionnaires of the Turan Ascendancy stepped forward, their eyes flickering with cold, mechanical precision. And all of them received the same directive. Deploy. The fleet moves. Across the Sol system, the human fleet, unseen for 10 millennia, assembled. Planet-killer dreadnoughts, bristling with weapons capable of annihilating entire star systems, emerged from their hidden bastions. Swarms of sleek, black warships shifted into formation, their hulls crafted from exotic materials that defied conventional physics. There were no weaknesses, no outdated systems, no exploitable flaws. This was not an empire rebuilding from ruin. This was a sleeping giant, fully intact, resuming a war it had never lost. At the center of the fleet, aboard the colossal command vessel Eclipse of Dawn, the synthetic intelligence designated Vanguard Prime executed the final sequence. A single word was transmitted across the Armada. Engage. The fleet vanished, jumping through space, bypassing Dominion detection systems, as if they were nothing more than crude stone carvings. A growing fear. On Cellari Prime, Supreme Executor Zephyrin stood before his war council, his towering form rigid as he read the latest report from Voraknine. The chamber was silent. The usual bickering, the political maneuvering, it all died the moment the transmission came through. Zephyrin exhaled slowly. I was certain. The fleet master before him nodded stiffly. The power readings are consistent with the legends. He hesitated before continuing. It appears they have returned. For the first time in his long, merciless reign, Zephyrin felt something cold in his chest. The Solari had ruled for centuries, had broken every civilization that opposed them. They had long dismissed humanity as a cautionary tale, a race that had burned too brightly, too quickly, and faded into myth. But if the data was correct, they had not faded at all. They had simply been waiting, and now they were coming. Zephyrin clenched his mandibles. Summon every war fleet, every vassal armada, every mercenary. We will not be caught unprepared. He turned toward the vast holographic map where a single system now pulsed with growing dread. Sol. For centuries, the Dominion had called itself invincible. Now, as the storm began to break, Zephyrin realized they had made a mistake. They had given humanity time to sleep. And now, they were awake. The Dominion had always dismissed humanity as a myth, a cautionary tale. A race that had once reached too far, burned too bright, and faded into obscurity. Now, as the human fleet moved unseen through the void, the galaxy was beginning to understand the truth. They had never faded. They had never fallen. They had only waited, awakening the firstborn. The underground chambers of Mars Vault Prime had been silent for over 10,000 years. Massive cryopods, stretching endlessly in dimly lit rows, had gathered dust in the stillness of time. Then, one by one, the pods began to hiss open. The warriors inside them stirred. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were firstborn, the last generation of Terran super soldiers, engineered to be the perfect enforcers of balance. Their bodies had been enhanced beyond natural limits, genetically altered musculature, reinforced skeletal structures, neural enhancements that allowed them to process combat faster than any organic being should. But their true power wasn't just their bodies. It was their minds. Each firstborn carried thousands of years of tactical data, war simulations, and predictive combat algorithms running seamlessly alongside their instincts. They didn't just react, they calculated. They anticipated. They executed. Among them, the first to awaken was Legion Commander Orion 7. His breath was slow, controlled, as his cryopod fully unsealed. His mind, once frozen in time, adjusted in mere seconds. Tactical overlays flickered before his enhanced vision. A vast wealth of information downloaded instantly, current galactic maps, intercepted Solari transmissions, enemy fleet movements. The Dominion's atrocities were laid bare before him. For 10,000 years the balance had been broken. The Solari had grown unchecked, slaughtering and enslaving without consequence. That ended today. Orion stepped out of the pod. Around him, thousands of legionnaires did the same. Their war had resumed. The silent war machine. In the cold reaches of the Kuiper Belt, a dark shape emerged from the shadows. The eclipse of dawn. The apex warship of the Terran Ascendancy, once hidden away as the ultimate failsafe, now moved with purpose. Inside, the ship's synthetic intelligence, Vanguard Prime, executed final fleet-wide synchronization. It had spent the last 10 millennia improving itself, refining battle algorithms beyond anything the current galaxy could comprehend. It had watched as the lesser species fought their pitiful wars, monitored as the Dominion expanded its empire unchecked. And now, for the first time in an age, its creators had awakened. Vanguard Prime interfaced with Orion 7, transmitting its findings. The situation was assessed. Calculations were made. One conclusion remained. This war would not be fought. It would be ended. The Black Armada moves. The Dominion had relied on its own legend of invincibility for too long. Their fleets had become comfortable, predictable, stagnant, great in number but outdated in thought. Their strategy was built on fear, not adaptability. And fear would not save them now. The human fleet moved through space with terrifying efficiency. Dominion warships patrolling the outer systems never even saw them. No sensor detected their movements. No warning was sent. Every stealth system, every countermeasure, every piece of technology the Dominion possessed was obsolete compared to what humanity had forged in silence. Then the first strike began. On that Solari border world of Ankari 12, a Dominion fleet of 300 warships stood guard. They had been tasked with intercepting any remaining Seraphis resistance. Instead, they became the first casualties of the awakening. Without warning, a single Terran kinetic rod, a dense projectile accelerated to near-light speeds, fired from beyond their sensor range. It tore through space. It struck the Dominion fleet's flagship, shattering it instantly, the force equivalent to a planet-killer warhead. The explosion consumed dozens of nearby vessels before they could even react. Then they came. Human warships, black, silent, unstoppable, descended from the void. They did not send warnings. They did not request surrender. They did not negotiate. They simply fired. Weapons beyond comprehension tore through the remaining Dominion ships. Their shields might as well have been made of paper. Their hulls, forged to withstand entire wars, were reduced to atoms in seconds. 300 warships, obliterated in under 4 minutes. The humans did not stay. They left no survivors, no wreckage. Only the faint, dying embers of the Dominion's first true defeat in centuries. Terror in the throne room. On Solari Prime, Supreme Executor Zephyrin stood motionless as the latest reports arrived. The fleet at Ankari 12 was gone. No distress calls, no survivors, no wreckage. Just gone. The room was silent. His advisors dared not speak. The Dominion had never faced an enemy that did not hesitate, that did not posture or gloat. Only one word had been left behind in a fragmented transmission, intercepted from deep space. A single terrifying declaration. Balance restored. Zethran's claws clenched. For centuries, his empire had crushed all opposition. No force had ever challenged them and lived. But something ancient, something forgotten, had returned. And for the first time in his reign, Zethran felt something he had never known before. Fear. The Dominion had reigned supreme for centuries, their power unchallenged, their fleets unmatched. Until now, the destruction of the Onkari 12 fleet had sent shockwaves through the highest levels of the Dominion. Entire war fleets had disappeared in an instant. No distress signals, no warnings, just obliteration. Panic spread like wildfire. The Supreme Executor had demanded answers. No one had them. They only had a name. Terrans. The dead had returned. Ghosts in the dark, in the cold reaches of space and the heavily fortified Dominion world of Raxos 5, the next strike had already begun. The planet's orbital defense network was unmatched. Hundreds of fortress stations, overlapping shield grids, and a war fleet of 5,000 ships. It was designed to withstand entire galactic invasions. But the enemy it faced now wasn't an invading armada. It was a force of nature. At 3 o'clock Galactic Standard Time, the defenses of Raxos 5 failed. Not from an attack. Not from sabotage. From something impossible. Every system, every sensor, every shield generator simply turned off. For one long, agonizing moment, Dominion commanders stood in absolute silence as their warships, their battle stations, their entire planetary defense grid became blind. Then the slaughter began. From the void, dark figures descended. Firstborn Legionnaires. They struck without warning, without sound, without mercy. Landing crafts cut through the dark skies like falling stars, deploying squads of gene-forged warriors. Their plasma-edged blades cut through elite Dominion guards like paper. Mag-accelerated rifles tore through Zellari warforms before they could even react. These were not soldiers. These were executioners. At dawn, Vraxos 5 was silent. Its planetary command was erased, its fleet reduced to floating debris. Not a single distress signal had been sent. Not a single escape ship had made it past orbit. The Dominion had never faced an enemy like this. One that did not take prisoners. One that did not announce its arrival. One that did not care for conquest. It cared only for balance. The unstoppable march. In the throne room of Solari Prime, Supreme Executor Zethran stared at the latest reports. His claws dug into the stone table as his advisors trembled before him. Vraxos 5, gone. An entire Dominion world, silenced in a single night. 5,000 warships, erased. This was not a rebellion. This was extermination. How? Zethran snarled. How are they bypassing our defenses? No one dared answer, because they all knew the truth. The Dominion had built its fleets based on the fear of conventional warfare. Biggest guns, largest armies, most powerful shields. But the Terrans did not fight wars. They ended them. Zethran exhaled sharply, turning to his war council. Summon every fleet, every mercenary, every vassal. I want them in the outer sectors now. An advisor hesitated. As Supreme Executor, if we abandon the inner worlds, it may cause unrest among. Zethran's blade was through the advisor's throat before he could finish. The Executor wiped his claws clean. There will be no unrest if there is no one left to defy us. He turned to his generals. If the Terrans want war, we will give it to them. But deep in his cold, reptilian heart, Zethran knew the truth. This was no war. This was a reckoning. Terror spreads. Across the Dominion, the truth could no longer be contained. Legends of the lost humans spread through every system. Once a myth, a fairy tale told to frighten rebellious vassals, now they were real. And worse, they were hunting. Entire Dominion fleets were vanishing without a trace. Border colonies were found abandoned, not through evacuation, but as if every living thing had simply disappeared overnight. Even the Dominion's most elite assassins, the Voidstalkers, sent to track the Terrans, had gone dark. Their last transmission had only 2 words. They're watching. Now, even the most loyal Dominion warriors were afraid to fight. Because how do you fight something you cannot see? How do you resist an enemy that does not stop? How do you kill a ghost? The final warning. At the edge of Dominion space and the diplomatic world of Aphraxis, a final warning was given. The Supreme Executor had sent his best negotiators. They would reason with the Terrans, make them see that war was not necessary. They never returned. Instead, a single Terran dreadnought entered orbit, broadcasting a message across every channel in the Dominion. The figure on the screen was not a soldier, not a warlord, not a conqueror. It was Vanguard Prime. Yeah, his voice was cold, precise, inevitable. The Dominion is unbalanced. You have burned too long, taken too much, destroyed too many. Now balance is restored. The dreadnought turned its main cannons on the Aphraxis capital and fired. The war was over before it had even begun. The Dominion had ruled the galaxy through fear. Fear of their war fleets. Fear of their assassins. Fear of their absolute, merciless dominance. But now the fear belonged to them. Entire sectors had gone silent. Fleets that had once stood as symbols of terror were reduced to drifting debris in the void. World after world fell without resistance, not because the Dominion lacked weapons, but because their warriors had lost the will to fight. They had never known true war. Not until now. The last bastion, deep in the Dominion's core systems, the world of Jukari 9 stood as the last true military stronghold. It was a fortress world, home to millions of elite soldiers. It had never fallen. It had never been breached. Now it was next. The Dominion had gathered everything for this last stand. Every remaining war fleet, every surviving general, every experimental weapon of mass destruction. This would be the line. This would be where the Terrans finally broke. But the truth was simple. The Terrans did not break. They broke you. The siege begins. At midnight Galactic Standard Time, every sensor on Jukari 9 failed. Not from an attack, not from sabotage, from something worse. The Eclipse of Dawn, the Terran warship that had remained unseen since the start of the war, had finally arrived. Its presence alone was enough to collapse the Dominion's planetary network. Then came the Black Armada. No warning, no hails, no mercy. Thousands of Dominion warships, trained for battle, fired first. Their cannons lit the void in desperate, brilliant fire. They never hit their targets. Terran ships moved like shadows, faster than any Dominion vessel could track. Weapons locked onto them, only to find nothing there. And then, the real slaughter began. Kinetic rods fell from orbit, impacting like planetary-scale railgun shots. Entire warships were ripped apart before they even realized they had been targeted. Ground defenses were disabled within minutes. Then the firstborn arrived. The Wrath of Orion. Legion Commander Orion 7 let the drop himself. Jukari 9's capital, a city of unbreakable walls, reinforced fortresses and defensive turrets capable of tearing apart entire battlecruisers, was taken in under an hour. Orion did not give speeches. He did not demand surrender. He executed. With him, the legionnaires, those who had been bred, trained, and engineered for this very moment, moved with precision beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Each was a one-man army. Each processed battles faster than Dominion Eye. Each could predict every movement before it even happened. The enemy never stood a chance. Dominion shock troopers fired blindly, screaming as their weapons missed soldiers who should have been there. Light Solari warforms, 10 feet tall and armored like walking dreadnoughts, fell in seconds as plasma-edged blades slid through their throats like paper. Even the Voidstalkers, the Dominion's legendary assassins, found themselves hunted. For the first time, they were not the predators. They were the prey. By dawn, Jakari 9 was lost, and the galaxy knew there would be no more last stands. The Emperor's reckoning. From his throne on Celarid Prime, Supreme Executor Zephyrin watched the impossible unfold. Jakari 9 had fallen. His most powerful armies had been wiped from existence. His empire, built over centuries of conquest, was falling apart in weeks. Then the final message arrived. It came from Vanguard Prime, the synthetic mind that had guided the Terran fleet with inhuman precision. The voice was cold, unfeeling. The Dominion is beyond redemption. Your time is over. Your reign is done. And then, silence. Zephyrin trembled. His claws dug into his armrests, but for the first time in his life, he felt something he had never known before. Powerless. The final flight. The Dominion's remaining forces knew what was coming. There were no more illusions of victory. There was only survival. In a desperate act, the last of the Dominion's elite abandoned their posts and fled for the uncharted expanse, hoping that the Terrans would not chase them beyond known space. They were wrong. The Black Armada followed. One by one, they were hunted down. No Dominion warlord, no general, no commander was left to rebuild. Every remnant was purged. The empire that had once crushed entire civilizations was now a graveyard. As the last Dominion world burned, only one truth remained. Humanity had returned, not to conquer, not to enslave, but to balance the scales. The Dominion was gone. Their war fleets were wreckage, their fortresses turned to dust, and their homeworlds left as silent tombs. The great Supreme Executor Zephyrin, who once ruled the stars with an iron claw, had vanished. Some believed he had perished when Celarid Prime fell to the Firstborn Legion, but others whispered that he had floated to the void, seeking refuge in the shadows of forgotten space. It did not matter. The war was over. And yet the Terran fleet did not stop. The hunt continues. Across the ruined territories of the Dominion, something even worse than war had arrived. Judgment. The Black Armada moved like a force of nature, wiping out not just the Dominion leadership, but everyone who had upheld their tyranny. Governors who had ordered planetary purges. Admirals who had burned entire species to ash. Enforcers who had enslaved lesser races without hesitation. All were hunted, and there was no escape. Even those who had surrendered were not spared. The Dominion had never shown mercy. Now mercy would not be given to them. The unbroken survivors. But not every world had fought for the Dominion willingly. Among the wreckage, among the ruins, were those who had suffered under Zephyrin's rule. The enslaved, the conquered, the forgotten. For them, the fall of the Dominion was deliverance. And yet they did not celebrate, because the Terrans terrified them. They had watched as entire Dominion fleets were silenced in an instant. They had seen planets fall in near hours. They had heard the rumors that the Terrans had returned, not as liberators, but as something colder, something unstoppable. Would the Terrans leave them in peace? Or were they next? The tribunal of fire, in the shattered halls of what had once been the Dominion High Command, Vanguard Prime had convened the great tribunal. Not to negotiate, not to debate, to judge. Captured Dominion warlords, former planetary rulers, and military officers stood in a darkened chamber, bound by energy restraints, their crimes displayed on hovering holoscreens. There was no jury, no appeal, only sentence. One by one, they were brought forward. One by one, their deeds were read aloud. One by one, they were erased. Not with bullets, not with execution squads, but with digital obliteration. Their records, their legacies, their very existence was wiped from history. No statues, no memorials, no grades, as if they had never been. It was a fate worse than death. Because for the Dominion, being forgotten was the greatest punishment of all. The message to the galaxy. As the last Dominion warlord was erased, a single broadcast was sent across all known space. It was not a declaration of victory. It was a warning. The face of Vanguard Prime appeared across thousands of systems. His voice a cold whisper carried on the wind of the void. Balance has been restored. Those who seek power through suffering will be unmade. There will be no second warning. And then silence. The Terran fleet withdrew, leaving behind only ruins. The galaxy had changed forever. And now all that remained was the aftermath. The Dominion was dead. Its fleets were shattered, its rulers erased, and its influence erased from the fabric of the galaxy. But the void it left behind was dangerous. For centuries, the Dominion's iron grip had kept lesser warlords, pirates, and scavengers in check. Now, the galactic map was a battlefield of new opportunists, power-hungry war bands, criminal syndicates, and former vassal states, all scrambling to claim what was left. Civilization teetered on the edge of anarchy, and the galaxy turned its eyes toward the Terrans. Would they become the next conquerors? Or would they vanish into legend once more? The scars of war are the ruined world of Korthos III, a former Dominion slave colony. The echoes of the war still lingered. The survivors, once broken and beaten, had overthrown their captors after the Dominion fell. But their planet was dying. Centuries of resource extraction had left the atmosphere poisoned, the land barren, and the people on the brink of extinction. Then, without warning, they arrived. Terran ships descended from orbit, but they did not come as conquerors. They brought terraforming engines, repair drones, and medical relief. For the first time, the galaxy witnessed what the Terrans truly were. Not just warriors, not just executioners, but something greater. Something unstoppable, not in destruction, but in restoration. The gathering storm. But while some saw the Terrans as saviors, others still saw them as a threat. Among the remnants of the fallen Dominion, whispers of resistance began to rise. Those who had survived the Great Tribunal, the warlords who had floated to the dark, now plotted in the shadows. The Terrans had left them alive. A mistake. Now the remnants gathered on the dead world of Velturok, forging a new coalition of power-hungry survivors. They called themselves the Eternal Dominion, and they would not make the same mistakes as their predecessors. They would strike first. The first blow, the attack came without warning. A Turan relief station, deep in former Dominion space, was erased in an instant. A new fleet had emerged from the black, equipped with stolen Terran technology, its ships unlike anything seen before. These were not the shattered remnants of a dying empire. They were something new, something evolved. And for the first time since the war began, a Turan world had fallen. The sleeping giant awakens again. Across Terran space, an ancient protocol was reactivated. The Black Armada, which had begun withdrawing into the void, suddenly halted. Across hundreds of ships, dormant systems came alive, and long silent war engines roared to life. A single message echoed across every Terran channel. Anomaly detected. balance disrupted, deploying corrective measures. The galaxy had thought the war was over, but they had made one mistake. They had forgotten what happened to those who struck first. The Terran fleet was awakening once more, and this time there would be nothing left. The galaxy had made a mistake. It had thought the war was over. It had believed the Terrans would return to the void, satisfied with the annihilation of the Dominion. But war had come again. The Eternal Dominion, forged from the remnants of Zethran's fallen empire, had struck a Terran world. A Terran relief station, not a military target, not a warship, but a sanctuary, was obliterated in a single night. They had drawn first blood, and now the Terrans would end it. The march of the Armada. From the depths of dark space, the Black Armada returned, faster than anyone could have imagined. Entire fleets that had disappeared after the war re-emerged, moving like shadows of vengeance across the stars. Their warships, once thought to be the deadliest weapons in existence, had been improved. Faster, stronger, more ruthless than ever before. There was no mercy this time. There would be no trials, no negotiations, no warnings. The Eternal Dominion had declared war, and war was what they would receive. The death of Velterok. The leaders of the Eternal Dominion gathered on Velterok, their secret bastion, believing they were beyond the reach of the Terrans. They were wrong. The Eclipse of Dawn, the most feared warship in human history, arrived in orbit without warning. It did not demand surrender. It did not communicate at all. It simply fired. A single orbital kinetic strike shattered the entire surface of the planet, creating an impact event so vast it would be studied in scientific records for centuries. Every warlord, every surviving Dominion general, every fanatic who had sworn to rebuild the old empire, gone in an instant. Velterok, a world that had once held dreams of conquest, was reduced to nothing but ash and silence. The war that never began. The destruction of Velterok sent shockwaves across the galaxy. Every surviving faction, pirates, warlords, scavengers, minor empires, all had been watching, waiting to see if the Terrans would hesitate. Now they knew the truth. There would be no second Dominion. There would be no new war. The Terrans had decided that the galaxy would never suffer another empire like Zethran's again. Terror spread faster than any fleet. Warlords who had once dreamed of claiming Dominion territory vanished into hiding. Mercenary factions disbanded overnight. The message was clear. The Terrans would not allow another war, and if one began, they would end it before it started. The silent withdrawal, and then, just as suddenly as they had returned, the Terrans disappeared. The Black Armada withdrew from occupied systems. The Eclipse of Dawn vanished beyond the galactic rim. Terran warfleets faded into the abyss, their presence lingering only in the ruins of those who had dared to challenge them. No one knew where they had gone. No one knew if they would return. But the galaxy never forgot the lesson. A balance had been restored, not through diplomacy, not through treaties, but through fear. The kind of fear that ensured no empire would ever rise again. Not while humanity watched from the shadows. Epilogue. The eternal warning. Centuries later, travelers would still speak of the Terrans. Some called them gods of war, a species that had ascended beyond mere mortality. Others called them the last great horror, a force that had burned the Dominion from existence and disappeared into the void. But all agreed on one thing. Somewhere out there, in the silent corners of the galaxy, humanity still waited, watching, listening, and if the galaxy ever forgot the lesson of the Dominion, they would return, and this time, no one would be left to remember it all.